Proximity Portal. If you like this, please like and subscribe. So what just happened? Thank you for paying attention to this matter. The 12-day glorious war ended yesterday, or did it? Take a ride with me. We're going to have a little chat about it. So this is Avi Penhallow, and I do this little commute and have a little chat about things that are going on. And of course, it's hard to escape the fact that Iran is the big issue in the headlines. And I wanted to just take some time to unpack a little bit of what I've observed in this, some of which I've seen in the media and some of it I haven't, which I'm quite surprised. First of all, we know that the pretext for all of this was the nuclear capability of Iran and everybody's worries about that, which has been the case for decades, which has been the subject of conflict and debate for decades. The question really is, why now? Why now did the great leader decide, and I mean our great leader, to carry out this action at the moment? Now, I have my suspicions. I'll back up in just a second and explain some other things about it. But my suspicion is that, well, first of all, I'll answer the question, was this a coordinated effort between Israel and the United States? I think that that's an oversimplified way of looking at it, first of all, because we're dealing with some complicated characters. I think you know who I'm talking about. Complicated characters with hugely inflated egos, compounded with their narcissism and detachment from reality, quite frankly. We're talking about our guy, at least, who has never seen a combat field in his life. We're talking about someone who, if you were to ask him to give his life, would be the first one out the door. Now, there are some of you that will talk about the assassination attempt. I think that's quite different than knowingly placing yourself in harm's way in the defense of your country. But what is going on with this 12-day war? I liken this to the fact that this person likes, I liken it to in the charismatic Christian movement, there was this wealth prosperity gospel thing called name it and claim it. Or we used to say grab it and blab it. And it's almost, so the idea behind it is, if you just say something with enough conviction, it will come to pass. Now, there's a difference, of course, when we're talking about it theologically. The name it and claim it movement was mistakenly, but based on the promises of Jesus that whatever you ask in my name, it shall be given to you. And they'll take a verse like that and basically put their wishful thinking into that mantra. Now, if other religions do it, it's demonic. But that's a whole other thing. But what Trump is doing right now, in a sense, resembles that sort of logic, this sort of name it and claim it. It's going to be a 12-day glorious war. It'll be called the 12-day war. And of course, Trump has a very nominal understanding of history and historical narrative. That is obviously a reflection back to the Israel's Six-Day War in 1967, in which there was a coordinated attack on Israel by the surrounding nations. And because of Israel's overwhelming firepower, and which of course is funded and provided by the United States, they were able to beat back and also gather more territory in a matter of 6 days. So it was called the Six-Day War. And you have to understand the MO of our great leader is to be remembered as a great leader. And sometimes he gets in his own way. But don't worry, because this video will be obsolete by tomorrow. Because the tactic is to flood the zone. That's Steve Bannon's term for just keep flooding the media, because they will suck it up with all kinds of like out of left field type of stuff. It'll keep them so distracted that they won't pay attention to what you want to do or what you're trying to do today. And so this entire episode, because that's what we're going through, like episode after episode after episode. Number one, it fatigues normal people and keeps them from really being able to keep track of what the hell is going on. That is if they're caught in the media cycle. And what was the pretext, or what was happening just before this happened? We were getting a lot of pushback. Whenever the Epstein files, that was a big campaign promise. All of a sudden, promises broken, and the narrative spin is so rapid that we just shift. Let's pivot. Now, I'm not saying that his sole decision to go and take this action against Iran right now was based on that. But I will say it's certainly a factor. And anybody who observes the great leader already understands how this works if they're observing without their biases. Now, whether or not Iran had or was close to the weaponization of their nuclear assets remains to be seen, because there's been no evidence. Now, there's one thing that we could be pretty sure about, and that is, if there was evidence, the great leader certainly would have used it to his benefit, even against the wishes of security and military officials. He would definitely have said something, alluded to it, but he didn't, which tells us that there's no evidence there. And you know what? I told a friend of mine online yesterday, if it emerges that they have evidence, I will be the first one to say I was wrong. But I'm not wrong about the 12-day war. Why? For some of you, you don't know what happened. So yesterday, Trump declared a ceasefire. This would be on June 23rd, 2025. And just a few hours later, they're bombing each other. Israel actually carried out one of the strongest bombing campaigns since this whole thing started today, after the ceasefire was declared by Trump, which neither country, Iran or Israel, acknowledged. So again, name it and claim it. He declares a ceasefire, which he can't really do. And both the countries who were involved in this said ceasefire don't even bother to acknowledge it. That pissed him off. That pissed him off so much that he had to use the F word with the media. He said that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Well. So, expect something today. I would expect something in the next 12 to 24 hours to try to pivot off of this. And this is not, I'm not even talking about this because I want to sit and like celebrate the failure of the great leader. If this were about national security, and if it were about keeping people safe, preventing war, I would be wrong to oppose the great leader of the regime. If it were about that. And if there were a happy outcome from all of this, I would be wrong to oppose these actions. But I think I'm on pretty safe ground here. So, that being said, there are some out there who I like to call means to an end people. It's like the Christianity that celebrates when something like this happens. Or their patriotism overshadows the Christ that they claim to belong to, which we're seeing a lot of these days. And then there's another narrative. Those of you who are familiar with the Proximity Portal and our background in ministry, you should be very familiar with this whole end time scenario. So anytime there's a headline that comes from the Middle East, of course it has to do with the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. This has been going on since before I was born, reading between the headlines and that sort of thing. So any sort of activity that happens in the Middle East, they find a way to squeeze it into these narratives, some of which are based on biblical texts, out of context, but some of them are based on biblical texts, and then some are just based on the narratives that have from the traditions that emerge from the sort of end times prophecy teachings and doctrines. And so what happens is now we have this very deadly mix of that sort of nihilistic end times prophetic interpretations of current events, mixed with this nationalism and militarism celebration of the United States as somehow the moral Christological agent on the planet, which is a quite suspect narrative to begin with, but it happens to be one that's very dominant right now. Now we'll add to the fact that there are a lot of players on the side of the people with these narratives who don't believe any of it. I'm talking about those who don't believe any of the end times narratives. They're atheist, but they still lend support, if not to the narratives, at least to the political aspects of those that are pushing these narratives for other reasons. And these reasons would be, in my view, based on bigotry, based on years and years of conditioning. And you know that this is the case when whatever they say matches with verbatim the talking points that are coming out of the right-wing media or out of the great leader's mouth. But the 12-day war has not ended. It's not a 12-day war. things are going to continue to escalate, especially since we do not have a leader who is good at negotiation. One of the things that I will end with here that people should have known by now, but they're finally figuring out, is that there is no great negotiator here. Negotiation is the furthest thing from this person's abilities. Unless you're talking about intimidation or the asymmetries of power, and by that I mean if I have a gun to your head and you comply, that's not negotiation. That's not diplomatic negotiation. And I don't want to get into all of the philosophical aspects of it, because you can't even have a state or a government unless there's violence to back it up. That's just by definition the way things work. But negotiation in the diplomatic sense is not holding a gun to someone's head, or not based on someone who has the largest military assets in the world facing somebody fighting you with a stick and calling yourself a great negotiator because you happen to have the assets. Now, that's true in the sense of war, as it is in Trump's life as a quote-unquote great negotiator businessman. We know that the mechanisms of capitalism are not based on necessarily negotiation, but of power. Power fuels the flow of capital and your access to it. You can call me a Marxist all you want, but the capitalist believes that. At least those who actually have power. You know, it's a lot of these people who don't have a lot of money that are defending capitalism that completely misunderstand that negotiation and the art of the deal has nothing to do with the success of the super wealthy. I'm not saying that they don't have to be clever and they don't have to make moves and they don't have to play a game. You could say, in a sense, negotiation is a part of that equation, but you're missing out on a key factor, and that is the game is rigged. Not in a conspiracy sense, but in the sense that those with power are going to do everything they can to keep it, and they do have the leverage to begin with when they're negotiating with everyone else. So, happy congratulations to the end of the 12-day war and its immediate restart. Thank you for paying attention to this matter. Hey, if you like my little banter, like and subscribe, and if there's anything you want to talk about, go ahead and drop it in the comments. I really hope you have a good day. I'm just arriving to work, and